Hello, and welcome to Read Becca. I have a huge pile of books to wrap up here for the QueerLit Readathon, which I really enjoyed participating in. I did not specifically go for a bingo or track the bingo board, so we will check how I did at the end. But my reading this week was kind of on fire. I could not stop reading, in part. If you have followed me, you already know this, but if you're watching for the first time, my library just reopened and I've been very excited. I'm a massive library user. Overdrive has been wonderful through everything the past year, but being able to browse physical shelves has been wonderful for me. So I've been very excited to pick things up and just grab whatever I'm excited about off the shelves. So let's get on to the stack very quickly, because it's going to take a little while. So first up, I've got Pet by Equihia Messi. And I know Freshwater was the group read, but I have already read that. So I wanted to continue on with some more of Emezi's work. I really enjoyed Freshwater and like the writing, so I've been interested to pick this one up since it came out. So this book follows Jam, a transgender girl who lives in a world, or a future Earth maybe, where there are no more monsters. The angels came and cleared them away. So everyone believes that things are safe and sound and there aren't any monsters. Jam's mother is an artist and she paints a strange creature one day. Jam then kind of goes to check out this painting and awakens the individual on the painting, and who walks through but Pet, who is the monster hunter. And Pet is quite confident there is a monster to be hunted. Jam and Pet seek some assistance, but no one will believe them. And I expected that to be a bigger element of this, but it really doesn't go much farther than that. There isn't a lot of time spent on convincing people that there are monsters. The initial effort kind of fails, and so then Jam and Pet take it to themselves to resolve this monster problem. So Jam and Pet kind of put their heads together and figure out how they're going to flush out this monster. And it does wind up being somewhere she would have never expected. And so this analyzes very much the reality that when we become complacent and we feel safe, we stop looking for the signs of monsters, they can exist right near home. So I think that theme was very hard-hitting and well done. This was pretty nuanced for the writing level. I would say this is on the younger end of YA in terms of the simplicity to read. Things that I would compare this to are maybe A Monster Calls, where it has that very fantastical elements in the forefront used to kind of tell a more serious and heavy themed story. Another one would be I Killed Giants, the comic book, or I know it's been adapted to a movie now. This reminded me a lot of that in many ways. So I enjoyed this very much. I think this was a 4.5 to 5 star read for me, and I will definitely be picking up some more of Emezi's work. Next, I read Hench by Natalie, Zina, Walschots. And in this, our protagonist, Anna, who seems to be either bi or pan, she does have attraction to both men and women that we see on the page, at least, though it's never explicitly stated. Anna is a temp, basically. She does data entry and data analytics for villains. So this is a sci-fi thriller about superheroes. And in this world, heroes and villains are kind of like corporations. They have office buildings with staff, and so she initially starts out temping and is barely scraping by, and then she kind of gets a job in one of the villain offices, and gains some prominence to the villain she's working for, and he decides he wants to have her at a press conference one day. And so, she's just there to fill the background, basically. And unfortunately for her, she winds up as collateral damage in the hero's attempt to take out the villain. So that leaves her disabled. She is left with a cane. She has a severe spiral fracture, and so she remains with a cane through the rest of the book, and she has a lot of time in recovery after that to think about what has happened to her. She loses her job. She has no insurance, so she's left in a really bad state, and she starts looking into the reality of the damage that these heroes have done without really thinking about what they're doing, because it's the bad guys that they're attacking. And she uncovers the fact that things only exist on the scale of damage that these heroes are doing in natural disasters. So there's a model for measuring that level of damage for natural disasters. So she takes that model and begins collecting data about the heroes and applying that model to the data about the heroes. And so she uses her time to make a conspiracy theory blog, basically. And, she's kind of shouting into the universe and not getting anywhere. People think she's a crackpot. So out of that, one of these villains begins taking her very seriously and hires her on as a data scientist to run a team for him. And so we see her evolve in the book as this data scientist, where not only is she seeking revenge for what has happened to her, of these heroes just callously disregarding the, little people who were kind of pawns to the villains that they did damage to. So she wants revenge, but the data is on her side. So she always has this kind of righteous feeling. And that brings up a lot of really interesting conversations through the book about, what is right and wrong when both sides are doing damage. So I loved the ideas of this, and that this is such a fresh take. I absolutely love spec fic with some admin to it, and this has a lot of admin to it. Obviously, she's running a team of data scientists, so if you aren't into that as much, I think that may not work for you as well. As well as that, the tone is very snarky. Anna is just a really, really sarcastic character. So I think if you don't get along with very heavy snark, think like Loki or Iron Man, their sort of characters. If you get along with that, you'll really enjoy this, I think. So I thought this was a fabulous debut novel. I'm really hoping we get some more books from the author very soon. And this one was also super queer. Like I said, Anna, our main character, is either bi or pan. We get a character with they, them pronouns. We get some background characters that are trans and additional non-binary or pan characters. So just, scattered throughout, we have great diversity in here. So very much enjoyed this, and I think more people should be picking this up. All right, so next I picked up Everything is Beautiful and I Am Not Afraid by Zhao. And this is just a little comic book, and these are individual comics, so I think this is probably very middle of the road, maybe 3 stars for me. I couldn't really comment too much on the content other than the author is drawing from their own experiences as a queer immigrant and a Chinese immigrant, and I think that it covers many different levels of that in really short snippets, so it doesn't get too deep, but there are emotional entries, you know, right from the start, it is tackling the coming out story of being an immigrant. So having that coming out conversation over the phone with a parent who is not so accepting because of their culture and what's kind of ingrained traditional values. So we have that. We have the trying to have a voice as an immigrant in America from those aspects. It seems that there is maybe a gender fluid, gender queer element as well explored in here, where it is shown how they're treated differently side by side depending on how femme or masculine presenting they are. So I thought there were a lot of really good elements to this, but as far as the actual comics, I think, you know, it was basically like a short story collection for me, where some of them just were misses and some of them were really big hits. I think there is one that's just a couple of pages, and most of them are just a couple of pages or a page. So this one I really thought was fantastic, where the character or the author has written, I am a queer immigrant, and then people are just putting their own messages over top of that, and eventually it's completely obscured. So I really thought that one was very powerful. But then, you know, some other ones were less effective. There were several toward the beginning where there was text in the actual comic squares that you were meant to follow in one line, but then there was additional text below the comic squares that was also making another narrative line, and it just didn't seem like it worked too well for me. So overall, I thought this was good. Probably like a 3-star. Really beautiful artwork. I definitely like the art quite a bit. And next I have kids books. So I got some children's picture books. I've got Jacob's Room to Choose and Jacob's New Dress. And these are by Sarah and Ian Hoffman and illustrated by Chris Case. So Jacob's New Dress is all about Jacob, who is kind of picked on when he decides to dress up as the princess at school. And kids tell him that, you know, a boy can't dress up as a princess, but he really likes to wear dresses. So he tells his mom he would really like to have a dress to wear to school, and she decides she would like to think about that, but eventually they make a dress together and he wears it to school. And that does set off some conversations, and the teacher, you know, in my opinion, handles it pretty well. But there is a child in this that has been taught and kind of voices the opinions that their parent has told them that boys can't wear dresses. So there is a little bit of bullying, I would say, to both of these books. But overall, I thought it was, you know, it was a pretty fair and somewhat realistic, age-appropriate level conversation on that topic. And then Jacob's Room to Choose is all about not judging people's use of the bathroom, really. So I really liked this one. So there are 2 kids in this one, Jacob and Sophie, and they both don't look like the pictures on the door of their bathroom. And so people chase them out of the bathroom, and they are very upset by that. They're emotional. And so the class has a conversation about it, and they decide that that's not a good thing to happen. And so they all make signs and a campaign about letting people use the bathroom they would like. I just love this little sign with the dinosaur, because I have to pee, let me be. I thought that was really great. So they ended up putting up signs and agreeing that they will accept whatever bathroom that people want to use. So those obviously are great for little gender non-conforming kids. I thought they were adorable. And then on audio, I listened to Across the Green Grass Fields by Shannon Mcguire, and really enjoyed it. I think it was probably a 3.5 to 4 star. It was not my favorite out of the series from the Wayward Children series. I think it's number 6. But it follows a new protagonist that we have not seen before, Reagan. And Reagan starts very young, so I think this is actually a great entry for a younger reader to get into the series. She starts, I think, 8 years old, and she has a group of friends, and she very much desperately wants to be accepted. All the girls' bodies start changing and going through puberty and getting periods, and rightfully, and so Reagan is not having those changes happen, and she feels like she is an outsider now. She feels like she's going to get left out. The other girls are kind of starting to notice that she's not fitting in the way that they expect her to, and she can't engage in those conversations that they're now having about their bodies and their problems. And so she brings it up with her mom, and her mom decides that's the time to let her know that she, in fact, is intersex. And so her body is not going to go through those changes without some help. And that's completely fine, and she's completely normal, but that it means that she's a little bit different. So that is the big catalyst in the first part of the book that sends her running away, and she spots a doorway and goes through the doorway to the Hooflands. So the Hooflands obviously is a horse land. We have centaurs, kelpies, that sort of thing, all of the intelligent horses, and they actually, the horses that she meets, the centaurs that she meets, herd unicorns. So she winds up staying with this group of centaurs who herd unicorns and kind of feeling like she finally fits somewhere. But the Hooflands knows that humans always show up and have an adventure and then leave. And so they all are kind of expecting that eventually she's going to go away. But she is determined that she will stay. And so, they kind of keep her hidden from everyone else so that she can just make herself at home. So she can't stay away from adventure, though. Adventure comes and finds her. So I enjoyed this one so much. I think reading this with Pet was very interesting because of the dynamic with the parent and child, where in this book, the parents had kind of kept it from her that she was intersex. And they were very, very supportive, but in the end, them having not integrated into her upbringing as, this is a normal thing, this is who you are, made it a huge shock for her, and she didn't know how to process it. So in contrast, in Pet, we have Jam, who also has these fabulous supportive parents, and Jam very much drove the decisions about herself and her body. And so there just wasn't any question at all. She was involved in conversations about her identity from a very young age. So I think those two contrasted together really was an interesting thing to see, having read them both so closely. So the last thing I read was another audio book. I read Tyler Oakley's memoir, Binge, and it's a pretty standard celebrity memoir. If you don't know who Tyler Oakley is, he is a famous YouTuber from, I think, the mid-2000s? I don't know when, years ago, back when it was kind of just becoming a new thing that you could be a famous YouTuber. But he was a very young guy at the time, and so this is kind of that young guy YouTube story, but he's also gay, and so it kind of comes right out of the gate talking about his coming out story and how natural that was for him, really. But he did have some difficult relationships with his father and estrangement. He also struggled with eating disorder, and so he talks quite a bit about that. This is a really light, very funny memoir, but it's just end to end, it's really difficult topics about broken relationships. He has an abusive relationship at one point. He even talks about, going through suicidal thoughts and contacting the Trevor Project and his support for the Trevor Project since then, which is like a helpline specifically for LGBT plus teens and those who need assistance and someone to call. So I think it is a very personal yet very funny story of his life that he's telling, and it's kind of told through anecdotes. So I enjoyed it very much, and like I said, I listened to it on audio, so it is narrated by Tyler himself, and I think he did a really great job of doing that. So I think that's it for what I actually read. The only other thing that I got to was I did about 80 pages of Catfishing on CatNet, and this one is also super queer. This is a near future AI thriller, and CatNet is a forum for cat pictures, and it is run by an AI, but nobody knows it's an AI until Steph. And so Steph is a girl who is in high school. I think she's in 11th grade. She is constantly moving around because her mother is a little bit paranoid and afraid after she was in an abusive relationship with Steph's father, who is constantly out to get them. And so they're moving all the time. She's never had any friends, but she has found friends through this CatNet forum. And Steph is finding a first crush with a girl at her new school, Rachel. And in the Clouder, which is the chat group on CatNet, we also have some non-binary and queer characters. So I think it's just a great, fun, but heavy, hard-hitting story. And I've got this one lined up as a reread because I really want to get to the sequel. I'm sure it's going to be another wonderful queer book. So that's what I read. Let's go look at how we did on the bingo board. All right, so we've got our bingo board pulled up here. So let's run through it. The memoir square, I think I hit that with Binge. Group read will give me a halfway on Pet by Akwaeke Emezi, since I did not read Freshwater. Hard-hitting contemporary. I did not read a hard-hitting contemporary. Question mark, I believe, is basically a free square, so I hit that one. Shorter than a novel. I hit that with multiple things. So I got the 2 children's books, I got the comic book, I got Across the Green Grass Fields is a novella length, and I think Pet is also just on the line between novella and novel. Brings you joy. I would say all of them bring me joy. MSpec was, I think, Met by Hench, which has a bi protagonist. Not set on your continent, I would say Pet meets that, I believe, because it's certainly implied that we're in probably Africa. Intersectional, yeah, sure. We've got people of color protagonists, and in Pet, and then in Hench we have a disabled protagonist. So I think that counts. Vintage, I did not read any vintage work. Summer vibes. I don't think I read anything with summer vibes. Superheroes, I sure did read Hench, and that counts for superheroes. Underrepresented identity, I would say intersex is an underrepresented LGBT identity, so we'll count that there for Across the Green Grass Fields. Religion. I think we would be really bending things if I counted Pet here, there are angels in it, but I don't think anything that I read had really strong religion elements. Recommended. I'm sure people have recommended me some of these books at some point, but I did not get any specific rec for this. 40% BIPOC. I did not hit that, so I did read a couple. We got the comic book that I read and Pet, but that I don't think is 40% of everything. So that, I believe, gives me a bingo on the second row across. So that's actually, overall, I hit most of the rows on 2 or more squares, so that is pretty darn good. I feel like without tracking, I was not expecting to get quite that much.